The station called Convergence Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a city made of light and metal. It was the largest structure ever built by any civilization in the known galaxy. Representatives from over 400 species gathered there every 100 years to discuss the future of their worlds. Trade agreements were signed, border disputes were settled, wars were avoided or sometimes started. The station had seen it all in its long history. Daniel Carter stood near the back of the great assembly hall and watched the proceedings with quiet attention. He was a tall man with grey eyes and a calm face that rarely showed what he was thinking. Earth had sent him as their representative because he was good at listening and even better at staying out of trouble. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Assembly for 11 years. They were newcomers. They were considered unimportant. Most of the elder races barely noticed them at all. Daniel preferred it that way. His instructions from Earth were simple. Observe, learn, do not make enemies, do not make promises, stay invisible. The two great powers of the galaxy sat at opposite ends of the chamber. The Dominion controlled over 800 star systems. Their ships were elegant and deadly. Their culture valued tradition and hierarchy above all else. High Arbiter led their delegation. He was ancient even by standards. His scaled body was draped in ceremonial metals that clinked softly when he moved. His eyes were cold and patient like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Across from him sat the representatives of the collective. They were massive beings with hard shells and compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. Their empire was smaller than but their warriors were feared throughout the galaxy. Warlord commanded their forces. He stood rather than sat because no chair could hold his enormous frame. Scars covered his exoskeleton like a map of every battle he had survived. The Ender had been enemies for 3,000 years. They had fought dozens of wars. Millions had died on both sides. Now they maintained an uneasy peace that everyone knew would not last. The only question was when the next war would begin and what would trigger it. Today they were about the Tessara Nebula. It was a region of space rich in exotic matter that both empires claimed as their own. The dispute had continued for decades without resolution. Daniel had sat through 6 hours of speeches and counter-speeches. Both sides presented evidence. Both sides rejected the other's claims. Nothing was accomplished. Then Warlord slammed his massive fist against his podium. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Everyone fell silent. Enough of this, growled. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. Words accomplish nothing. They hide behind protocol while their ships encroach on territory. We have talked for 50 years. Perhaps we should settle this the old way. High Arbiter tilted his head slightly. You suggest combat trials, how primitive. I suggest we let fate decide. A champion from each side. Neutral ground, single combat until one yields or dies. The winner takes the nebula, no more debates, no more endless meetings, just a simple answer to a simple question, which of us is stronger? The assembly hall erupted in whispers. Combat trials were legal under ancient galactic law. They had been used to settle disputes for thousands of years before diplomacy became fashionable, but no one had invoked them between major powers in living memory. The stakes were too high, the consequences too unpredictable. Considered the proposal for a long moment. Daniel could see calculations happening behind those cold eyes. They had excellent warriors. Their champion would likely win, and a victory would give them the nebula without the cost of another war. And who would judge such a contest? Asked carefully. Who would ensure that the rules are followed? Made a sound that might have been laughter. Let one of the lesser races observe. Someone with no stake in the outcome. Someone too small to have any interest in our affairs. His compound eyes swept across the chamber and stopped on the human delegation. The Terrans, they are insignificant, they have no alliances, no ambitions. Let them watch and tell the galaxy what they see. Daniel felt his heart stop for a moment. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. 400 species stared at the lone human standing in the back rows where junior civilizations were assigned. He felt very small suddenly, very exposed. His assistant, a young woman named Maria Santos, grabbed his arm. We should decline, she whispered urgently. This is not our problem. Earth does not want to be involved in this. She was right. Daniel knew she was right. Getting involved in the rivalry between the and there was exactly the kind of thing his superiors had warned him against. It could only lead to trouble. But he also understood something else. Both empires had just acknowledged humanity in front of the entire galaxy. If he refused now, he would look weak. Earth would look weak, and weak species did not survive long in a galaxy ruled by predators. Daniel stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. He could feel his pulse pounding in his temples, but he kept his face calm and his voice steady. Earth accepts the of observing this trial, he said. We will judge fairly and honestly. Whatever happens will be witnessed and recorded. The galaxy will know the truth. His massive head, the Terran speaks well, it is decided then. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not object. Very well. We will select our champion and meet at a neutral location in 30 standard days. The Terrans will observe, and the matter of the Tessara Nebula will be settled once and for all. The assembly began to disperse. Daniel remained standing in place as the great powers filed out around him. Maria was at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What have you done?" she asked quietly. Daniel watched the delegations leave through opposite exits. He thought about the forces he had just placed himself between, two empires that had been trying to destroy each other for 3,000 years, and now humanity was standing in the middle. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I think we are about to find out." He had no idea how right he was. The words he spoke that day would echo across the galaxy for generations. They would ignite a war that consumed entire civilizations. They would change humanity forever. But that was still in the future. For now Daniel Carter simply stood in the emptying chamber and wondered what he had gotten his species into. The answer would come soon enough. Neutral Station Kappa had been abandoned for 200 years. It was a military outpost from an earlier age built in a region of space that belonged to no one, the perfect location for a contest that neither empire trusted the other to host fairly. Daniel Carter arrived with a delegation of 12 humans aboard the ship called Horizon's Edge. Commander Lisa led the military contingent. She was a veteran of Earth's border conflicts with a sharp mind and even sharper instincts. Dr. Park served as he understood alien physiology better than anyone else humanity had to offer. Pilot Jake Harris flew their ship with the casual skill of someone who had been born in space. Both empires brought full ceremonial fleets. They arrived with 50 silver vessels that moved through the void like living things. Every line of their ships spoke of elegance and precision. They came with 60 warships covered in weapons that looked designed to terrify as much as destroy. Their vessels were brutal and heavy and made no pretense of beauty. Daniel stood on the observation platform as the champions were presented. They had chosen from their elite guard. He was tall and slender with scales that shimmered like polished metal. His movements were graceful as water flowing over stones. The energy blade at his side with a soft, deadly sound. He was called the greatest warrior of his generation. He had never lost a duel. The champion was called. He was enormous even by the standards of his massive species. His exoskeleton was covered in scars from 100 battles. Each scar represented an enemy who had tried to kill him and failed. He carried no weapon because his body was weapon enough. His claws could tear through starship armor. His strength could crush stone to powder. "The rules are simple," Daniel announced. His voice carried across the platform through translation devices that rendered his words in 100 different languages. "Combat until one champion yields or is unable to continue. No outside interference. No weapons beyond those already declared. Earth bears witness." The fight began. Moved first, he was fast beyond anything Daniel had ever seen. His blade flashed through the air, leaving trails of light in its wake. He struck 3 times before the warrior could react. Green blood sprayed from fresh wounds. The watching made sounds of approval. But did not fall. He did not even slow down. His massive arm swept through the space where had been standing a moment before. The warrior danced away untouched. He struck again and again. Each blow should have been fatal. Each blow drew blood and still kept coming. Daniel watched with growing unease. He had studied the files on biology before coming here. He knew they could regenerate from wounds that would kill other species, but seeing it happen was different from reading about it. Was healing almost as fast as could hurt him. The wounds were closing. The blood was stopping. The warrior was absorbing punishment that would have killed a dozen other beings and simply refusing to die. The battle continued for 4 hours, grew tired. His movements became slower. His strikes lost their precision, kept coming, always forward, always relentless, like a mountain that had learned to walk. The end came suddenly, overextended on a thrust aimed at Sai. The warrior caught his arm and twisted. Bones snapped with a sound that echoed across the platform. The energy blade fell from nerveless fingers and clattered against the deck, lifted the champion by his broken arm and held him suspended in the air like a trophy. "Yield," rumbled. His face was twisted in agony, but his voice was clear. "I yield." Dropped him to the ground and turned to face the watching fleets. He raised his arms in victory. The delegation erupted in celebration. Roars of triumph echoed through the station. They watched in absolute silence. Daniel stepped forward. His heart was pounding, but his voice remained steady. "The contest is concluded. According to the terms agreed upon by both parties, the Tessara Nebula belongs to the collective. Earth has witnessed. Earth has judged. The matter is settled." High Arbiter moved through the crowd of observers. His ceremonial metals clinked with each step. His cold eyes fixed on Daniel with an intensity that made the human want to step backward. "We do not accept this outcome," said. The celebration stopped. The silence that followed was complete. You agreed to the terms, Warlord growled. The Terran judged fairly, your warrior lost. I agreed to nothing, replied. Our representative exceeded his authority when he accepted this challenge. The entire trial is void. The Tessara Nebula remains disputed territory. Lisa stepped close to Daniel and spoke quietly. This is about to go very wrong. We need to leave. She was right. Daniel could feel the tension building like pressure before an explosion. Both fleets were powering weapons. Both sides were for what came next. The have-no snarled. You lose fairly and then cry foul like hatchlings. If you will not accept the of combat, then you will accept the of war. The first shots were fired before anyone could respond. A cruiser opened up on the nearest vessel. Return fire came instantly. Within seconds, the space around Neutral Station Kappa became a hell of weapons fire and exploding ships. Move, Lisa commanded. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward the docking bay. Everyone back to the ship now. They ran through corridors that shook with impacts. Pieces of the station were breaking away as stray shots tore through the structure. Jake Harris had the Horizon's Edge powered up and ready when they reached the bay. They barely had the airlock sealed before he was accelerating away from the dying station. We are being targeted, reported from the sensor station. His voice was remarkably calm for someone watching missiles streak toward them. Both sides, they are shooting at us. Why would they shoot at the observers? Maria demanded. Daniel understood. Because we witnessed their failure, both of them. We saw the break their word. We saw the provoked into war. We are loose ends now. We know too much. Jake threw the ship into a series of evasive that pushed them all against their restraints. A destroyer exploded off their starboard side. A cruiser broke apart ahead of them. Death surrounded them in every direction. Jumping to the light in 10 seconds, Jake announced, hold on to something. The stars stretched into lines. The battle vanished behind them. They had escaped. But behind them, the first battle of a galaxy-wide war was still raging, and humanity was no longer a neutral party. They were targets now. The war spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 3 months, over 60 star systems had become active combat zones. The threw everything they had at each other. Ancient hatreds that had simmered for 3,000 years finally boiled over into open conflict. Worlds burned, fleets clashed, billions died in the crossfire between two empires that had forgotten how to do anything except hate. Any species caught between them was forced to choose a side or face destruction. Smaller civilizations that had maintained neutrality for centuries found themselves dragged into a war they wanted no part of. Some joined the hopping for protection. Others allied with the out of fear. A few tried to remain independent and were crushed by one side or the other for their refusal to commit. Earth chose neither. The United Nations Security Council met in emergency session in a bunker deep beneath Geneva. The greatest leaders of humanity gathered around a table covered in star charts and casualty reports. The debate was fierce and went on for days. Secretary General listened to every argument before speaking. He was an older man with tired eyes that had seen too much conflict in his lifetime. He had hoped that joining the galactic community would bring humanity peace and prosperity. Instead, it had brought them to the edge of annihilation. Some of you want us to side with them, he said. Their technology is more advanced. Their culture is closer to our own. You believe they will protect us if we serve them. He paused and looked around the table. Others want us to join them. You say they are more straightforward. Maury, you think we can trust them to keep their word. Another pause. A third group wants strict neutrality. You hope that if we stay quiet and small, the storm will pass us by. Admiral Cole stood up. She was the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, and she had no patience for political games. Her voice was hard when she spoke. Neutrality is a fantasy. Both empires have already declared us enemies. Our ships are being attacked on sight. 3 of our colonies in the outer territories have gone dark. We do not know if the people there are alive or dead. We are at war whether we want to be or not. The only question is whether we fight or wait to be slaughtered. The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right, but no one wanted to admit it. Slowly, then we fight our own war. For humanity, for Earth, for our survival. The Terran Initiative was established within the week. Every ship humanity possessed was mobilized. Every soldier was called to duty. Every factory began producing weapons and supplies. Earth had spent centuries fighting itself. Now humanity would discover what they could accomplish when united against a common enemy. The first real test came at Station. It was a human outpost orbiting the nearest star to Earth. Both empires wanted to use it as a staging ground for attacks deeper into human territory. In a rare moment of cooperation, the sent a combined assault force to take the station and eliminate the human presence in that sector. Commander Lisa was in charge of she had 42 ships under her command. The enemy fleet numbered over 300. The math was impossible. Everyone knew it, including Lisa herself. All ships this is, she broadcast to her fleet. We are not going to win this fight through firepower. We are outnumbered but we are going to win it anyway. We are going to win it by being unpredictable, by being crazy, by doing things they have never seen before and cannot prepare for. Execute pattern chaos. Pattern chaos was something humans had invented out of desperation. It had no fixed formations, no predictable movements, no chain of command during combat. Every ship acted independently based on their own. Pilots made their own decisions. Captains chose their own targets. The only rule was to keep moving and keep fighting. To it looked like madness. Their military doctrine was built on precision and coordination. They could not understand an enemy that refused to behave in patterns they could analyze. To it was equally confusing. Their warriors fought in strict hierarchies where every soldier knew their place. An army without commanders made no sense to them. The battle began with the enemy fleet advancing in perfect formation. They expected the humans to retreat or surrender. Instead, the 42 human ships scattered like startled birds and then dove straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Jake Harris was flying a fighter so small it barely registered on enemy sensors. He wove between massive warships firing at anything that came within range. A cruiser tried to track him, but he was already gone before their weapons could lock on. He hit their engine section on the way past and watched them spin out of control into a destroyer. Lisa commanded from the bridge of her ship, the Defiant. She did not give orders. She did not need to. Her people knew what to do. They had grown up playing games that rewarded quick thinking and individual initiative. They had competed in sports that valued improvisation over rigid strategy. They were humans. They were chaos incarnate. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, humanity had lost 19 ships. The enemy had lost 112. The rest of the combined fleet retreated in disorder. Word of the victory spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The insignificant Terrans had won. The newcomers from the outer spiral arm had bloodied the two greatest military powers in known space. It should have been impossible, but it had happened anyway. Admiral Cole received the news in her command center on Earth. She allowed herself a small smile before returning to the endless work of keeping humanity alive. It is only one battle, she told her staff. The war is far from over, but now they know, now they all know, humanity will not go quietly into the night. Across the galaxy, species that had been ignored and oppressed for centuries looked at the news from station. They saw something they had thought lost forever. They saw hope. Daniel Carter had not slept properly in months. Since the disaster at Neutral Station, Kappa, he had been working without rest trying to find allies for humanity in a galaxy that seemed determined to destroy them. Most of his efforts had failed. The major powers either feared and too much to help or saw no benefit in aligning with a species that might not exist much longer. But after the victory at Station, everything changed. Species that had ignored humanity for years suddenly requested meetings. Ambassadors arrived at Earth in ships of every shape and size. Messages flooded in from sectors of the galaxy that humans had never visited. Everyone wanted to talk to the people who had done the impossible. They were the first to formally propose an alliance. They were an aquatic species who breathed through gills and communicated through patterns of bioluminescence that their translation devices rendered into spoken words. Their ambassador was called Flowing Current Through Deep Waters. She was ancient by her people's standards and had seen enough of galactic politics to know when the winds were changing. I was strip-mined by the 4 generations ago, she told Daniel in their first meeting. They took everything of value and left us with a poisoned ocean. We have spent 100 years as refugees moving from station to station begging for scraps. We have nothing left to lose. We would rather die fighting beside you than continue living as we have been. Daniel accepted her offer. They had little military power, but they brought something more valuable. They brought legitimacy. When other species saw that humanity was willing to stand beside the weak, they began to reconsider their own positions. They came next. They were small beings with 6 limbs and minds that understood machines better than any other species in the galaxy. They had exploited their engineering skills for 1,000 years, forcing them to build ships and weapons for an empire that treated them like tools to be used and discarded. Their representative was a nervous creature named Quick Hands Working who trembled when he spoke, but whose words carried the weight of centuries of resentment. We can build you better ships, he offered. Stronger, more efficient. We only ask that you treat us as equals, that you let us share in what we create together. Daniel agreed without hesitation. Within weeks, engineers were working alongside human scientists to improve every vessel in the fleet. Then came the who were tall and thin and saw the future in ways no other species understood. They came with their warriors bred for combat over countless generations. The Midnight Syndicate came with their network of spies and informants that reached into every corner of the galaxy. One by one they arrived. One by one they pledged themselves to humanity's cause. Dr. Park watched the growing coalition with wonder and gave it a name. He called it the Alliance of the Overlooked. The name spread quickly. It captured something essential about what was happening. All of these species had been ignored or exploited or forgotten by the great powers. Now they were coming together under human leadership to demand a place at the table. Not everyone was pleased by these developments. High Arbiter sent a message directly to Earth that arrived while Daniel was meeting with yet another potential ally. "You do not understand what you have done, Terrans," the message said. "The balance of power has existed for 3,000 years for a reason. The and the keep each other in check. The smaller species know their place and remain safe in their insignificance. By disrupting this balance you invite chaos. You will destroy yourselves and drag countless others down with you." Secretary General composed the response personally. Your balance of power meant billions living in fear and servitude. It meant species like the watching their worlds die while empires squabbled over scraps. It meant the building your ships while receiving nothing but contempt in return. If that is order, then we will take chaos. We will take our chances with freedom. The war continued to escalate. The Alliance won some battles and lost others. Human casualties mounted as the conflict spread. The colonies at Tau Ceti fell to an assault. Barnard's star was devastated when they bombarded it from orbit. Each loss was a wound that humanity felt deeply. Then the attack on Earth itself came. A stealth fleet penetrated the Sol systems using technology that rendered their ships invisible to human sensors. They appeared without warning less than a day's travel from humanity's. Their mission was simple: destroy Earth, end the human threat once and for all. Admiral Cole commanded from her flagship she had 20 ships against 60. The odds were even worse than Station had been, but she did not hesitate. "All ships engage," she ordered. "Buy time for the ground, protect Earth at all costs." The battle was brutal and short. Human ships threw themselves at the fleet with desperate courage. They died by the dozen, but they slowed the enemy advance. They bought precious minutes for the planetary systems to come online. Cole watched her fleet being torn apart around her. She watched good people die in the darkness between Earth and its attackers. Then she saw the planet-killer missile launch from the flagship. It was aimed at North America. If it landed, millions would die in an instant. "Helm," she said quietly, "intercept course, maximum acceleration." Her bridge crew understood what she was asking. None of them protested. None of them tried to talk her out of it. They simply did their jobs. The placed itself between the missile and its target. The impact vaporized the ship instantly. Admiral Cole and her entire crew died in a flash of light that could be seen from the surface of Earth. But the missile was destroyed, and in the seconds that followed the ground fired everything they had. The remaining ships were torn apart by weapons platforms that had finally locked onto their targets. Earth survived, humanity endured. Admiral Cole's last transmission had been recorded. It played across every screen on the planet and was broadcast to every ship in the Alliance fleet. "Earth endures, make it mean something." Those words became a rallying cry. They were painted on the hulls of ships. They were spoken before every battle. They reminded everyone what they were fighting for and what some had already sacrificed. Daniel Carter heard the recording while standing on the bridge of an upgraded cruiser. Tears ran down his face, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "We will," he promised. "We will make it mean something." The Alliance of the Overlooked grew stronger that day. Grief became determination, loss became resolve, and humanity learned that their capacity for sacrifice could inspire an entire galaxy. 2 years had passed since the challenge that started the war. 2 years of battles and death and worlds reduced to ash. The galaxy was exhausted. Every species that had been drawn into the conflict had paid a terrible price. The Dominion had lost a third of their fleet. Their elegant ships drifted as wreckage in a dozen star systems. Their economy was collapsing under the strain of endless war production. High Arbiter looked older than he had ever looked before. His scales had lost their shine. His cold eyes had grown tired. The collective was equally devastated. Their warrior caste had been decimated. Entire generations of their best fighters had been fed into battles that achieved nothing. Warlord bore new scars from personal combat. He had led his warriors from the front as tradition demanded. He had watched too many of them die. The Alliance of the Overlooked had grown to include 47 species. They had won impressive victories and suffered terrible defeats. Their resources were stretched to the breaking point, but they had survived. More than that, they had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a coalition of the weak standing together against the strong. Humanity stood at the center of it all. They had paid dearly for their position. The colonies at Tau Ceti and Barnard Star were gone, the populations there either dead or scattered as refugees. Earth itself bore scars from the attack that had killed Admiral Cole. Millions of humans had died in a war they had never asked for. But they had endured, just as Cole had promised they would. It was the who made the first move toward peace. A secret message arrived at Daniel Carter's quarters late one night cycle. It bore the personal seal of Warlord and contained only a simple request: meet with me. Daniel consulted with his advisors. Lisa warned him it could be a trap. Park suggested they demand guarantees of safety. Maria Santos pointed out that they had nothing to lose by at least hearing what had to say. In the end, Daniel went alone to a barren moon far from any fleet. He brought no weapons. He had no guards. If wanted to kill him, there would be nothing he could do to stop it. Sometimes trust required risk. The warlord was waiting when Daniel arrived. He stood in the thin atmosphere of the moon looking up at unfamiliar stars. He seemed somehow smaller than Daniel remembered. The weight of the war had diminished even his massive frame. "You came alone," observed. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. That was either brave or foolish. "Perhaps both," Daniel admitted. "What do you want?" Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were heavy with weariness. "I was wrong about your kind. When I first suggested your people observe the challenge, I thought you were insignificant, too small to matter, too weak to threaten anyone. I wanted a neutral judge that both sides could ignore after the trial was over." He turned to face Daniel directly. His compound eyes reflected the starlight. "I was a fool. You are not insignificant. You are perhaps the most dangerous species I have ever encountered, not because of your weapons or your ships, because of what you represent, because of what you have shown the galaxy is possible." Daniel waited in silence to continue. "You fight without as we understand it. You have no formations, no hierarchy in battle, no predictable patterns. It is infuriating. My warriors do not know how to counter an enemy that refuses to behave as an enemy should. You break every rule we have spent millennia developing, and you win anyway." "We are not trying to be warriors," Daniel said quietly. "We are just trying to survive." Made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. "That is what makes you so dangerous. You have no traditions binding you, no ancient codes restricting your options. You simply do whatever works. It is terrifying." He paused and looked back up at the stars. "They will never admit defeat. Their pride will not allow it. But they are as tired as we are. They have lost as much as we have. If someone were to propose a settlement that allowed all parties to claim some measure of victory they might accept, they would have to accept. Their empire cannot survive another year of this war." Daniel understood what was being offered. "You want humanity to broker a peace. I am asking you to do what you have done since this began. Stand in the middle and refuse to move. Be the rock that both rivers must flow around. Force us to find a path that does not involve destroying each other." The negotiations took 8 months. Daniel aged 10 years in that time, or at least it felt that way. Every day brought new crises. Every agreement led to new disputes. The demanded concessions, the refused to yield. The alliance species each had their own requirements and grievances. Somehow Daniel held it all together through patience and stubbornness and an absolute refusal to let the process collapse. The Treaty of New Geneva was signed on the anniversary of Admiral Cole's death. The date had been chosen deliberately. Her sacrifice had saved Earth. Now her memory would mark the end of the war she had died fighting. The terms were complex, but the essence was simple. The Tessara Nebula would become neutral territory administered by a joint council that included representatives from the Alliance of the Overlooked. Human observers would remain permanently stationed there to ensure all parties kept their word. The Alliance was formally recognized as a legitimate galactic power with full voting rights in the Assembly, and a new charter was drafted that gave smaller species a greater voice in galactic affairs. High Arbiter approached Daniel after the signing ceremony. His cold eyes studied the human with an expression that was difficult to read. "You have changed everything," said. There was no warmth in his voice, but there was no hostility either, just a cold of what had happened. "The galaxy will never be the same after what you have done." "We did not ask for any of this," Daniel replied. "We just wanted to be left alone." "That is no longer possible. You are in the middle of everything now, Terran, and the middle is the most dangerous place to be. Everyone will look to you, everyone will expect things from you, everyone will blame you when things go wrong." Daniel looked out at the gathered representatives. Hundreds of species filled the Great Hall. Some had been enemies days ago, some were still suspicious of each other, but they were all here. They were all willing to try something new that was worth something. He thought of Cole and Jake Harris, who had died at Tau Ceti. He thought of all the humans and allies who had given their lives to reach this moment. They had paid for this seat at the table. They had earned it with blood and courage and sacrifice. "We will manage," Daniel said. "Humanity always does." Warlord had been watching from across the room. He approached as departed and stood beside Daniel in companionable silence. "You know this is not really peace," rumbled quietly. "It is only a pause. The hatred between my people and the run's too deep to be erased by treaties and ceremonies." "I know," Daniel admitted, "but a pause is better than war. Maybe in that pause something will change. Maybe new generations will grow up without the hatred of their ancestors. Maybe they will find a better way." Considered this for a moment. "You are an optimist. That is either admirable or naive." "Perhaps both," Daniel said with a small smile. The war was over, the galaxy had been transformed, and in the middle of it all a small species from a modest yellow star had proven that even the overlooked could change the course of history. The stars had noticed them now. There would be no going back to insignificance, no return to the comfortable obscurity of the outer spiral arm. Humanity had taken its place among the powers of the galaxy. For better or worse, they would have to live with the consequences. But as Daniel Carter looked out at the stars that night, he felt something he had not felt since before the challenge. He felt hope, not certainty, not confidence, just the quiet possibility that things could get better, that all the suffering might have been worth something. Earth endured, and now it was time to make it mean something. The story of humanity among the stars was only beginning.